Johnny Fontana, Real World NF Scorpio, back with another video.
I don't believe what people say. I don't know about you, but I don't. Why do we buy mobile homes that never move? Why do we need a Hummer to go shopping? Why do we buy Ferraris when we cannot drive more than 35 miles per hour? So I don't believe what people say. I was trained, because part of my background is to work with autistic children, children that do not speak. And I had to try to understand these kids, and I was trying to cure them. And of course, they didn't speak, so I could not believe what they said. They didn't say anything. And so there is always an unconscious, hidden message behind what people do and what people say and how they function. And that's what I want to understand. I want to understand why. And I usually say it's because I'm a founding father. And so think about that. When you do things, when your customers do things, what is the reference system that has been imprinted at a very early age that they're not even aware of it anymore, and that they activate when they want to relate to that, when they want to buy this, when they want to do that?
And so today, we find ourselves with the YouTube community coming to a woke, aka come to Jesus moment, which I find very fascinating, but not so fast.
But we're talking about real people here. And if I say one thing about FI that I have learned about the dark sides of FI or something from my own experience, then that is going to absolutely be colored by my FE preference. And I guess really the thing I would like to share in this video is just the whole idea that we all need to be keeping in mind, in my opinion, is how is your bias influencing your definition?
Is a type that she relates to a fairly good extent, but she also finds significant discrepancies. And I try to explain to her that this model is a fluid model. It's a model that's best understood as providing tendencies rather than absolutes. She typed me as INTJ, and I reminded her of it, and she said, yeah, but now that you have this better understanding of the F/T distinction, and that you explained it to me better in more detail, I can clearly say you're a feeler, but you're a logical feeler. And that's INFJ for you, I guess, but it's only a certain type of INFJ. Other INFJs are feely logicians or whatever, Sometimes feelings comes first, sometimes it's as if TI or logic comes not first, but it's a bit more visible, a bit more prominent. In any case, all these different kinds of INFJs. Frank James is a certain kind of INFJ. I'm another kind of INFJ. Huey is another kind of INFJ. Pukoki is yet another kind. I mean, guys, if you watch a lot of INFJ channels, for those who are really INFJs anyway, it probably is quite obvious that there are lots of different types. And from discussing this topic on the INFJs.com forum, I can clearly see that there are lots of people who relate more to a certain type of INFJ and other people who relate to another type. Same with INTJs, same with INFPs. It's logical, which means that there's a lot of variety within each type.
Because the MBTI believes type is fixed, it also automatically avoids thinking about how a personality can change. The primary idea of the MBTI is that our personality type is what we tend to act like and how we tend to appear to friends, family members and co-workers. On personality tests that measure the MBTI, we are asked about what we tend to do and how our friends tend to perceive us. This is supposed to give us a strong answer on who we are, when in reality we can act in many ways that go against how we appear.
So, let me preface by saying that I wholeheartedly agree with everything, pretty much everything that those YouTubers had to say, right? I don't disagree at all, okay? But what I find fascinating is how they came to these conclusions or to, these ideas and thoughts so late in the game. And there is a reason why, which is the reason for this video. You see, MBTI, personality, and all these things have a way of driving certain personality types. Okay? Doesn't matter at the fundamental level, okay, that the core level, which personality type, but you have the subtypes, right? within the types. So, for example, you have an INFJ like me, who's more SC driven just because of my exposures and so forth and so on, versus a Ren, who's more into philosophy, more into, he's more TI driven. Okay, even though he has FE, but he has a lot of TI tendencies as well. He has FE tendencies. So you can be balanced. There's nothing wrong with that. And you have people who are just strictly TI, so they lack FE. They don't understand how to socially stabilize certain situations. They'll think they're coming across a certain way, and they don't realize how people are perceiving them to be a little bit too brash and too harsh, and they're just like, well, I don't understand, like, why is this person taking it so whatever, or they don't realize it. And it's not to say that they're bad people. It's just that's not the way that they think, and there's nothing wrong with that, because we're all different, and you cannot have every INFJ going to be feely type of people, especially when they've gone through different experiences through their life and they've been conditioned certain ways. But that's the sort of reptilian concept or approach to certain things, whereas MBTI, it makes for the people who are already into that linear, rational, logical state of mind to approach that way. And when the less exposure you have to dynamic situations, different cultures, different situations, makes you a little bit more cortex, as Dr. Rapil he says here.
What about the cortex? Well, the cortex is control. The cortex is going to slow down the reptilian. Don't be aggressive. Don't be too strong on that. Just calm down, relax. The notion of delay, notion of time, take the time, think, think several times before you say something, because like this you're not going to make a mistake. And so this is the notion of the cortex, to control. Going to school, children learn to use their cortex. I mean, you're never supposed to be too loud, you're never supposed to move too much, you're never supposed to yell, to cry. I mean, this is the cortex trying to control. Education, in many ways, is an education of the cortex, trying to force the cortex to take over the limbic and the reptilian. And the result is that we have very cold people sometimes that are out of touch with their emotions and out of touch with the reptilian dimension of survival. Let me give you an example. Chrysler had a problem with the back door, actually the latch of the back door of the minivan. And I was working with them at the time, and the top people told me, we didn't do anything wrong. We have all the data, we have all the numbers, we know that this is right, there is nothing wrong with this door, right? And so we're not going to pay anything. That was a cortex reaction. We have the numbers, we have the data, we have the scientific dimension. When they had the trial, the woman that had lost her child came, and she had just one thing, a reptilian picture. She has a picture of the child that died. And she was crying, and she said, my child died. Right. When you have the reptilian versus the cortex, the reptilian always wins. It doesn't matter what was the reality, the numbers. She got, I think, $185 million award. I mean, you don't need to explain, this is it, this is a reptilian. If you don't have a reptilian dimension, you're never going to win. That's my passion. That's what I'm trying to understand. And how did I discover a way to decode culture, to try to understand why this culture does that, why this culture doesn't do that, why is it? And if you are a member of a given culture, most of you might be American, but some of you come from other parts of the world, you have different codes, like different glasses to look at the world. And so when you start speaking with somebody else, you say, did you see that? That what? No, that over there. There is nothing there. You don't see it. It's quite amazing. So some people see something that other people don't see. Why? Because you get these cultural glasses that tell you, look at that. Let me give you an example. In different languages, you have different mental taxonomies, right? For example, in America, everything is neutral. Things are neutral, usually, right? In the French culture, Italian, Spanish culture, everything has a gender, right? So when you look at that, you see a male or a female. But in America, you just see neutral, so you don't see the same thing. I mean, for me, a table, une table, is a female. right? And so when you set up a table, you make it look very nice, beautiful. You put some flowers, some jewelry, some stuff, and then you put a little tablecloth, which is like a skirt. Think about that. You can have a mini skirt or a long skirt, but this is a skirt, right? And then you start setting the table with flowers and everything. It's very beautiful. Now, when you sit at this kind of table, if something goes under the table, which is under the skirt, very erotic kind of stuff. Americans say, what is he speaking about? It's just a table, you know. But no, it's not. You know, it's things going under the table. Woo, so the meaning of under the table in the French culture is like under the skirt of a girl or a woman. It's just, hey, what's going on here? So, okay, crazy. French are crazy as you know. So this is what is interesting, this different set of glasses. How do you learn to see the world in a certain way when other people see it in another way, you see? And it's quite fascinating from one culture to another. That's why we don't understand each other.
Okay, so, and let me also say that this is the reason why you have the C.H. Josephs, which is a T-type, ENTP or ENTJ, whatever. Eric from Talking Famous, ENTP, Dave Superpowers. They all use systems. Okay, they systemize, these personality models. Okay, and if I can borrow the term from Ren, okay, they approach it from like a more schematic approach, right? So they look at the schematic and they're able to chart and produce results, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that because, again, we have to be able to acknowledge other people's strengths. So when you have questions about the system, you go to these T-types and you say, hey, I need further analysis, so therefore can you provide me your findings? Boom, boom. Whereas someone like me, I'm more of like, again, the person who goes outside, who throws out my tentacles, who feels certain things, who experiences certain things, and then I can internalize it and then provide that information back to the T-types so that they can now continue their theories and so forth and so on. However, the problem is that there aren't a lot of folks that are the sort of ground troops, so to speak, that come back and provide this information. It's a lot of the folks who provide MBTI content tends to come from a more heady, sophisticated, intellectual, academic, like nerdy type, which is nothing wrong, but you have to be somewhat of a nerd to become interested in these sort of personality models and really go deep into the functions and so forth, because the average person in the streets, they're not interested in this kind of stuff. You see what I'm saying to you? So, but again, I made references early on and I started picking up the dots. And this is what's fascinating. Okay, so I'm going to provide you two contexts so that you can, again, understand, where I'm coming from. So let me give you one context here.
I was lecturing in Switzerland at a school, Polytechnicum School of Engineers. And I'm sure some of you are familiar with the engineer mind, how engineers think. They're very cortex. They're supposed to be very cortex, controlling numbers, everything. And I was teaching in this school, and one day one of my students, an engineer, came to my office and told me, Doctor, I have some news for you. I said, well, what is it? Well, I would like to get married. I'm going to get married. Oh, I said, well, this is great. I mean, do you know already your future wife? And he said, no, not yet. But I have a plan. I have a strategy. I have a critical path. I know exactly what I want to get. I have a deadline. And I have 185 specifications. I have my list of specifications. And now I'm going to start working, and I will let you know. I said, wow, this is interesting. Good luck. Let me know when you find her.
And let me now give you another one here.
I think that's why a lot of people are drawn to the game, because they think, okay, here are these rules that govern social interaction. And if I learn these rules, I learn these theories, I can protect myself. I can just, go down the flow chart and I'll never have to feel bad ever again. I do get a lot of engineers on boot camp, and I'm sure in some small part that's due to the fact that I live in Silicon Valley, San Francisco Bay Area, and there are a lot of engineers here, and that's what attracts them to the game. This idea that it's something they can figure out. It's this puzzle, right?
Okay. So again, when I first came into MBTI, within the first 2 weeks, I was just fascinated by how everyone just speaks based off of paper. It's like, wow, like, why is everyone just so, like, driven by cognitive functions, and there's no real world, like, language, right? There's no information like this.
Every culture can be understood between time, space, and energy. I want you to pay attention in your store, in the mall, in the supermarket, about these 3 dimensions, time, space, energy. They vary completely. Recently, I went around the world shopping because you stimulate my thinking, and so I wanted to have something to tell you here today. And I went to shop in Kuala Lumpur, I went to shop in Istanbul, I went to shop in Singapore, I went to Shanghai, I went to Beijing. I mean, it's amazing. I went to Paris and Frankfurt. And I look at time and space and energy, completely different. So think about time and space in your store. Let me give you the CNA for the American culture, and then I will compare with the Japanese culture to show you how different it is. I used to live in Geneva when I was working with my autistic children. In Geneva, I take my car, 5 minutes, I drive to Annemasse, and I'm in France, and I can go shopping in France. 2 hours, boom, I'm in Germany. 3 hours, boom, I'm in Italy. And I used to do that back and forth the same day. Okay. Then I came to America, rented a car in New York, and drove west. For 1 week, I was in America. 1 week. Every night, I could sleep in the same Holiday Inn with the same green, ugly carpet. I could eat the same salad with no taste. I mean, for 1 week. So the notion of space is very important. We have space. That's why we cannot make any profit with small cars. These people in Detroit try to make profit with small cars are never going to make it. When you see a company that say they're going to make profit with small car, sell your shares.
Okay, so you see how you can see Dr. Rapil, because he's obviously into marketing, he works for L'Oreal, he works for Johnson & Johnson, GM, and all these marketing company as a marketing psychologist. So he was able to understand cultures, travel the world, and really find themselves immersed in these different situations, and be able to understand beyond just the linear, rational, logical approach. And again, that's what most people do. Today's college, that's what it has you doing. It has you going straight. Even a famous Intel agent, he says it here.
So every single kind of music that I ever learned or I ever played is reflected in every single thing I do musically, because I analyzed all the music that I'd ever done and ever understood and ever played, broke it down into its smallest components, and re-synthesized it into something brand new. That's what musicians do. That's what athletes do. And I'll throw out a quick plug here for music in the schools and athletics, because I'm sure a few of you have children out there, and you're probably wondering, is anybody in any of our schools teaching our children how to think in a nonlinear fashion? Or is it just Battle of Hastings, 1066, and thank you very much? Is that how we're teaching our kids? When you study music and you study athletics, you are actually learning to think in a nonlinear fashion. Ma'am, what's a basketball player? What does a basketball player do? Puts the ball through a hoop, right. Okay, now that's exactly what his job is. Okay, let's break down the basketball player into what he really does. He's a runner, right? He is a wrestler because he has to fight. He's an artillery officer because he has to constantly come up with the ballistic algorithms to put that ball in a ballistic arc into the hoop. He's a strategist because he has to think on his feet and come up with instant strategies right in the middle of what some people would say combat. Von Clausewitz would certainly argue that that was a form of combat. So how do you do all these things at the same time? It's called nonlinear thinking. It's the ability to think a number of levels and a number of layers at the same time. That's what musicians do as well. Tempo, and time. And by the way, tempo and time are not the same, because time is an absolute, tempo is an absolute connected to another word called groove, which can be slightly manipulated. Pitch, syncopation, harmony, counterpoint, lyric. And if you're improvising, you got to think on top of that. That takes some nonlinear thinking too. So one of the first things we need to do is we need to educate our children on how to do this. And I love my kids, and are all great. And yeah, I got a call from my doctor, and that's Dr. Vinny Gumbatz. It's actually a real doctor. About 6 years ago, he said, Skunk, I got a problem with my daughter. I said, what's the problem? Well, she's texting, and then she's looking at MTV, and then she's on the phone, and she's doing her homework, and she's on the computer, and she's playing a video game on the side. I said, so what's her grade point average? She said, B+. I said, what's your problem? I mean, all you're doing is you're seeing a generation transform itself into adapting to social media and newer technologies. And they do it seamlessly. That's the good news. The bad news is that the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, when we were looking at how we would describe the kind of candidate that we would want to be an image analyst, what we found was these kids were real good at all this stuff. But what they couldn't do is they couldn't think deep into a problem.
You see what I'm saying to you? Again, you have to connect the dots. But a lot of people who are very cortex thinking, who are very linear, logical, they don't go beyond. That's why often when I say they don't go beyond, they don't have their feelers out. So a lot of the times they're within their own world. They're in their labs, right? So someone like me, I'm everywhere, and I'm like, hey, Ren, look at that, look at this, look at that. And a lot of people, their response is like, oh wow, I didn't know that. Oh, I don't get involved. I don't see, like when I asked Joseph, I was like, hey Joseph, what do you think about the culture now? Like, what do you think about where MBTI is going and so forth and so on? His response was, well, I don't really know because I'm not really interested. I'm not really out there. So again, so he has his own system in his own personal lab, but he's not going out there to really figure out what's happening like a Gary Vaynerchuk, which again, I'm going to repeat myself, but he says it here.
Yeah, Blair, I'm watching it very, very, very. Listen, I watch anything people are doing. The answer is yes, I watch that, just like I watch absolutely everything. The only thing I do is trade people's attention and behavior. That's what I do for a living. The reason I'm right so often is the only thing I spend time consuming is you. That's it. I don't watch shows. I don't watch anything. I don't consume anybody's content. All I do is read your comments on my stuff and other things that I know are popping in culture. My religion is the attention and consumption and reaction and process that people go through when they interact with things.
Wow.
So you see the differences, right, between the F, the SC, the F types who are genuinely interested in knowing about people versus the T types who are mostly interested in about system building. And there's nothing wrong with that. But surprise, surprise, this is personality. So yes, you can have your system building, you can have that approach. But if you're not dealing with people and understanding the fluidity and how, for example, the internet is altering our behaviors and how it's creating, different types of sort of creating different divisions, you see what I'm saying to you? It doesn't matter because I can you can say that's TI this or TI this, but does it really matter? Because you can tell, oh, this is TI, he's doing this, he's doing that, but at the end of the day, are you going to be able to apply that function in order to create a better person? You see what I'm saying? That's the end goal, because we can self-develop all we want, but if we cannot take this self-development and you now say, oh, well, INTJs are like this and this, because then most people go beyond themselves, because now they relate and compare INF this versus ESTP versus this versus that. Okay, fine, that's great on paper, but now you're in a room, you're managing, because we all have to work. We all become supervisors. We all become managers. We all become entrepreneurs, and we have to supervise and manage people, right? At some point in time, if you want growth. Guess what? You have 5, 6, 7 different personalities in your office. How do you now not only be a great manager, but also be able to listen to these individuals, but also be able to direct them, right? And also be able to apply, pressure and help them grow through these struggles, right? And based on their past experiences, what they bring to the table, they may come from Brooklyn, they may rob kids as a kid like a Mike Tyson. So what do you do with the Mike Tyson, right? Yeah, you can TI him, or he is an EST this, or he is an EST that, but how do you relate to this person? How do you calm this person down? How do you? And here's the point that I'm making right now, veterans. Yeah, because I'm a veteran. Listen to this with regards to veterans.
Today, a federal investigation confirmed what we reported on this broadcast last year, that many veterans are being over-medicated in VA hospitals, and some of the overdoses have been fatal.
So again, I'm connecting the dots. Although I'm going all over the place, but I'm painting a picture. I'm saying that you cannot live on paper. And that's what people do when they come to MBTI. That's what psychiatrists do. They live on paper. Because the paper says this, and therefore they're going to do this, but not realizing that you have to have been exposed to different situations, different dynamics in order to be able to help people.
We don't really have any specific blood tests or other tests that are definitive for any mental illness whatsoever.
What kind of biological tests do we have available today for detecting mental illnesses?
None.
There is no rational science behind what they think is the cause of these symptoms. The medications that are being given to people are, without exception, introducing chemicals that are altering the brain in ways which can be very damaging. And I'll go a step further and say that in the absence of a proven chemical imbalance for which the medications are, quote, rebalancing or fixing, the medications are in fact toxic.
How many patients have you been able to cure so far?
I would say one.
How many people have I cured? Well, there are no real cures right now in psychiatry.
Yeah. The idea of you asked me about the issue about how many people I've cured. I don't know that any of us are ever completely cured of anything.
I have not been able to cure many patients.
I have cured none of my patients.
You see what I'm saying to you? To relate on that level. And a lot of people can't, because a lot of people have been so insulated. Again, those who are drawn to the fields of psychology, psychiatry, social work, a lot of them are very insular in the way that they approach certain things, because they're very academic. Because you have to be very college bound. You have to be an intellect. You have to be sophisticated. You have to have knowledge, like to go through and sit, through these courses and spend 7 years, 8 years in school, and basically sort of keep yourself in a bubble and not go out, not experience, because you know what I'm saying to you? So again, there's a disconnect, because people don't realize that now you have a lot of people who go to school and do this and do that, but the world is so big because people are engaged and people have seen the internet, so people now want to travel. Now they get exposed. They're exposed to different stuff that create different types of mental disorders, mental deficiencies, all this stuff. And then they come back and they seek help. But the people who are helping them have been here. You know what I'm saying to you? So when I ask you, hey, have you noticed that? Oh, I haven't really noticed that. But you want to go into psychology. You want to go into into social work. But you're not really up in arms of what's going on around you. You're not looking at the different patterns, looking at the different, issues, the different mental issues that are rising. So for example, listen to Jonathan Hadid.
Okay, the number, there it is. The rate for the youngest girls, check that out. Now the youngest girls, these are 10 to 14-year-old girls. These are preteens, okay? They didn't used to cut themselves. They used to have very low rates. But bang, beginning in 2010, it shoots up. It's up 189%. It has nearly tripled in the last 5 or 6 years.
What's the cause?
We don't know for sure, but the reason why, so because of the huge sex difference, the leading candidate and the timing, look at that timing, is social media. So if you look at what happened in this country and all around the world, Facebook opens up to the world in 2006. You don't have to be a college student, but very few teenagers have a Facebook account in 2006. 2007, the iPhone comes out, but it's very expensive and very few teenagers have one. By 2010, 2011, around half of American teenagers have an iPhone or Samsung. They have a smartphone and they have access to social media in middle school. Because even though for Facebook and Instagram, I think the minimum age is and was 13, my son is 12. A lot of his friends have Instagram. You just lie. So middle school kids are now getting on social media. By 2010, 2011, you've got a lot of them. And that's what I think is the main cause of this, because social media does not really affect boys very much. But man, does it affect girls.
Okay. So you want to become a social worker, but you're not really interested in finding about this. You're not, your place, your fingers are not everywhere. All you do is you sit here and you remain in this place here of cognitive function. Oh, let's go into socionics. And then when someone says something, hey, this is what's happening, and your only response is, interesting. I already know it's your rap. It's a rap. Like you have no interest. It's not interesting because you have no interest in following through because there's no follow-up. You quickly go on to the next interview question. If you're high context, you probably know who I'm talking about, right? As soon as the person goes into a really good place, that person says, interesting, because that person is so focused on other chat boxes and what people are saying and not really focused on the interview and creating that dialogue and continuing that flow. Interesting, because you know that person doesn't have the capacity, INFJ or not. That's high context. If you know what I mean when I say high context and you know who I'm talking about, you know who I'm talking about. But again, I'm not trying to put names, and it's not about being passive aggressive. It's just sometimes you have to call it what it is, but at the same time, you don't want to cause, ruffles and so forth and so on. But again, that's the thing. It's like someone like me who came into this MBTI game, I already noticed. I'm like, why are people so stuck here? And then now, for people now to all of a sudden realize, come to this woke moment of like, MBTI is this and this, that. And it's like, but what were you doing all this time for these past, how many, 45, 60, 70 videos? It never occurred to you? You see what I'm saying to you? Like, but again, this is personality we're dealing with. We're not dealing with science. We're not dealing with math and exact science. We're not dealing with we call it again, physics. We're dealing with personality, and personality is driven by different situations, culture, life experiences, different, people who have struggled, who have gone through different mentorships, gone through different places in their lives that allow them to either elevate themselves or go down, some negative path and not be able to, to sort of come back from that. You see what I'm saying to you? So what I'm saying is yes, it's fascinating, but at the same time, it's like I already knew that these folks who are having these come to moments, every last one of them, and there's no exception, it's like you should have known coming into this game. You should have known coming into this game. So the fact that you're making this video now, to me, it's a little too late, because you've gone through 50 videos of making low-hanging fruit videos. So yes, now I'm being a little bit more tough on you, because it's like you've been going through these whatever, now all of a sudden you want to change directions, not realizing that you've built a following of folks who are just interested in that, and they don't really have the capacity to go there because you never really groomed them for that. It was never there to begin with, because everything for you is this and that, and ITG is this and that and the third, whatever, and you never really discuss, like, hey, what are the possibilities? Like, what happens? So, for example, I'm in this new management position, right? And where I came from before, they were more like, it was more logistics, but from the ground level, right? So there were a lot of worker beats, right? So hands-on, people from different backgrounds, but they were very into like labor hands-on, right? Whereas here, I'm dealing with more intellectual types, okay, a little bit more smart folks, not as A-type personality, but more B and C personality, okay? So these folks are not really into the weapons and all that stuff. They're not really out there. They're more into behind the desk, into computers and all that stuff, right? Very just heady kind of people, quirky, INTJ types, right? So what happens? I have to now be able to now take all of these personalities and adjust, how I, because there's an INFP there, there's I don't want to say INFP, but INFP tendency person, someone who has INFJ tendencies, someone who has ENFJ tendencies, a lot of NFs, you know what I'm saying? People, very feelers, very sort of, folks who can get, disturbed easily, like if you say something to them, they'll get thrown off, and they'll have to take a day of leave because they just they can't take the stress, versus before, like, they thrived on stress. They were always going out, and like on weekends flying, jumping out of planes, jumping from cliffs and skydiving and all that stuff, and going hunting and outdoor activities in Vegas. Whereas here, they're going to the restaurant, to the foodie, to the movies, very low risk behavior. So I have to now approach these people, but understand and say, hey, I know where you're coming from. I feel more comfortable with these folks because it's my level, but at the same time, I've been exposed to these people, so I know how to sort of have that sort of leadership authority sort of approach, because I can lead these folks. I don't have to be like, oh, like I get you, and then have that that rationale sort of behavior and not really push them, because now I can have that rationale and be like, hey, I know exactly why you feeling the way you did. I know why you didn't go to lunch with that person, because that other person was coming and you didn't want to fight for the front seat. I get it. Like, I totally get it. And I've expressed that. Like, I totally feel that feeling, because you wanted that one-on-one, but that person came in, now it's the third leg, and you sort of feel uncomfortable and you didn't want to have to deal with that awkwardness. I get it, bro. Like, I totally get it, right? Whereas in my other job, I couldn't do that, because it's like, the guy is like, dude, what are you talking about? Like, why are you being so like that for? Like, so I can do that with these folks, but at the same time, I can sort of be like, hey, it's time to go, and it's time to do this, whatever. But again, this is all dynamics, and it doesn't matter with MBTI, socionics. As you stay there, guess what? That's not going to help you approach these situations. You're not going to be able to adapt and overcome situations if all you do is you rely on these models. And that's the thing. It doesn't matter going forward, because people are looking for new models. You will approach it the same way unless you change your mentality. Unless you stop looking at, these models from that systematic approach constantly, and not sort of swerve away from that. Let me give you another example from Dr. Rapil. You see what I'm saying to you? So again, it's like everything has to be systematic, this, that, and when he approaches, a situation where it's totally different, now he's like, oh, I'm going to take it. Because again, the reptilian always wins. You see what I'm saying to you? So the bottom line of this video is that this woke come to Jesus moment was inevitable. You see what I'm saying to you? But again, some people come to it faster than others. I am not a cognitive function guru, so I came to terms faster. Whereas those folks, they're more into the system, so I come to the system building and understanding cognitive functions slower than they do. However, when we're dealing with personality, the reptilian, my way beats their way, because there is no time to go back and reference the book. You have to act according to what's in front of you now. You see what I'm saying to you? You have to be upfront and be able to navigate different personalities, because if not, you're going to find yourself constantly in reference mode and not being able to get anything done, not being able to provide any kind of service or context or perspective to anyone else and help these other people. You see what I'm saying to you? So just giving you that perspective, right? So again, I find it funny. It's not about tooting my horn. Again, it's providing perspective and saying that yes, the people who come at this, they do great work, but there needs to be a balance, right? More of a balance. I provide what I provide. They provide what they provide. But the thing is that I don't change. I'm not saying, oh well, I found this and this is what, you know. I've always said MBTI is a problem, that people are coming like this, people are doing this. That's why I go on forums and I'm like, what is going on in these forums? I've always maintained that. The problem is that these folks have approached their certain way, and now all of a sudden they're like, oh, I can't believe what's going on. I can't believe, we're moving to socionics, so it's got to be a different way. That's a problem. You know what I'm saying to you? Because then instead of now taking both approaches and providing that sort of schematic approach, but at the same time applying it to self-development in a way that others can really relate to, rather than just being more from a heady, quirky, intellectual, very scientific, like Michael Pierce type, approach, which is fine, but not everyone is a Michael Pierce. Like if you take someone from the streets, they're not going to be into that kind of stuff, and people don't realize that. That's why you have a lot of intellects who really just don't understand common people. You see what I'm saying to you? Like listen to Jordan Peterson as he states the whole professional versus working class, dynamic, the differences.
One of the things that working class guys in particular, which is one of the things I really loved about working class jobs, is they're always looking for some humor. So it's like if person A is teasing person B, that's kind of comical. But if person B comes back with a good comeback, it's like, that's even better, So I think that's a lot of how those jobs are rendered tolerable, right? They're hard, dirty jobs. Right. Dishwasher's a good example of that. It's not dangerous. Although cooking is you got to watch your step. I got burned a lot when I was cooking. But what makes those jobs not only tolerable, but even desirable is that you can develop a tremendous amount of camaraderie around them. I've never really experienced that at a professional level job. That just doesn't happen the same way. And there's a real loss in that. So it's fun to be part of a team that's doing, grubby, hands-on things and having a ridiculously entertaining, vicious, cruel, and evil time while you're doing it. That's very entertaining.
You see what I'm saying to you? But again, like logical cortex-headed people, they don't look at that. They're like, oh, there's no difference. Like they cannot deviate from that. Like for them, it's like, straightforward. So it's just very funny. But anyway, just wanted to just provide that context so that you understand. Again, it's not to say that they need to stop what they're doing or stop presenting their points of view, but I'm saying there needs to be more within the community that people can sort of gravitate towards, besides just the 90% schematic system cognitive function approach. There has to be more of what I do, which is not the whole touchy-feely, I'm struggling and how do you overcome fear. I don't do that. It's more of like, hey, let's provide perspective. I'm at this new job now. I'm like working with some INFP tendencies, INTJ tendencies, INFP tendencies, ENFJ tendencies. Whereas before, I came from like the more like ESTP, ENTJ, P type of like personalities. How do I now, navigate these folks? How do I go, and approach them differently? How do I now have to mentor one of my INTJ supervisors, who I manage him, but he's my supervisor, and now I have to direct him and mentor him in his approach, how he approaches certain situations. You see what I'm saying to you? And let him know, hey bro, you're coming across a little too not sarcastic, but you're not realizing that you need to employ a little bit more FE, right? Because you're a little bit more like logical, like, oh well, you should have known this, and the way he addresses certain people, it's like not from a sarcastic, not from a very aggressive, but more from like a sort of like a INTJ, very like cocky sort of, you know, you should know this, you know, why don't you know this, you know, sort of like he knows better than everyone else and they should be at his level type of, you know, approach. And I have to be like, bro, like, and also, but he has a regressive FE, which I'll get into as well. I'll discuss what regressive FE is, just something that I coined, in that he'll like write emails out to directors, you know, and directors will come back to me and say, hey, why is your personnel writing these emails like this? You know, why are they taking this tone? And when I have to confront him, I'm like, hey, listen, you know, this is a director you're addressing. Yeah, I know that we maintain, you know, this system here, but the way that you address certain individuals has to come from a more tactical, more professional, right? And he's like, oh, but now I don't understand, you know, I didn't mean anything by it. You know, I don't understand why he's taking it that way. Again, you're not really understanding their perspective and how it can come across a certain way. You know, that yes, I understand what you're saying. I understand how you may not understand that. But I cannot baby you. I cannot rationalize with you, because at the end of the day, guess what? It comes down to tact. It comes down to your ethics, to how you deliver a message, okay, and how people perceive. And you need to make sure that you're neutral so that people cannot perceive it as otherwise offensive. But he just still to this day doesn't understand that. But when I say it's regressive, his regressive FE is because when you have other people who come in, and he'll be like, oh, well, how come, you know, they didn't acknowledge this, or that I did that, or this, or how come, you know, they haven't spoken to me and shut me down like you have, and you're very personable, you know, he called me very personable, but, you know, that person didn't reach out, and I feel that that person maybe doesn't like me or whatever. And I'm like, but do you understand that that's not the place for that person? Like, that's not the time for that person to do that. There will become a time when that person approaches you, but not in this situation. So like they you know, so for them, they come across a certain way and not realizing how they come across, but they can also grasp how someone may come across, and it's not about intentional, it's just that's not the time and place for them to approach that person. So it's very regressive, right? So they just don't understand. So the FE is very low, and FE has nothing to do with making people feel good. It's about social stability, understanding social dynamics, understanding when to approach certain things, when not to, when to make people feel good, when to sort of, you know, sort of clear the air, when to use tactic, right, to create neutrality so people don't perceive certain things. Like, that's FE. It's all of that is basically social stability, right? Knowing when to engage. If you're an authority figure, right, if you're a director, you cannot just walk in and just be like, hey, everyone come talk to me, open doors, you know, like you have to go through your supervisor first and the manager. Like, you can't just go to the corporate office, call corporate directly, right? You have to go through your supervisor, then your supervisor will have to go to regional, then your regional will have to go to corporate, right? You just can't call corporate. It's like, hey, how come you don't have your supervisors who are managing you taking care of you first, right? Because they have to do their job. So that's, you see what I'm saying to you? So, but he doesn't understand that. He's like, well, I should just be able to go them straight to them directly. That's regressive FE, not understanding boundaries and so forth. That's part of FE as well. Anyway, I know this video is getting too long, but I'll make a video on that. But again, just to sort of close off, like, again, the MBTI has to evolve. You have to start now taking these concepts and applying them to real world situations. You cannot apply these real world situations if you're not exposing yourself, if you're not finding out different situations. What the internet now is doing is how, you know, it's affecting people's interactions with others, how, you know, colleges now, how people are, you know, reacting to certain people, how there's more of this, there's more of that, there's more suicides, more depression, more of that. What's causing these things? Like, if you're not really into that stuff, because it's all personality, right? This is not, again, this is not math, this is not physics, it has to do with personality. So if you're only coming at it from a systematic point of view and you're only staying in your own, behind your closed doors, and you're not really engaging, then you're not going to understand how we're evolving, and you're not going to be able to connect the dots. That's just basically what it is, and that's what people are coming to realize, that you've just been in a box, and you're not realizing that, yes, what I've been saying is now just coming to be true, just like Billy Corgan says here. You see what I'm saying to you? But again, some people don't like Billy Corgan. But guess what? We're basically both saying the same thing, at the end of the day. So, and it is what it is. Johnny Fontana, Real World and Scorpio, we out.